Hello artists, this is part two of decorating our painted paper that we will eventually weave with. So what you're going to want to take is your dried piece of painted paper. You're going to want to take your watercolors out again and some school supplies you have. So I'm going to open up my tray. Oh, and you need a cup of water again, halfway filled. I'm going to take out my brush. I'm going to wet it up, make sure it's clean. And I'm going to take this eraser I have. So I'm going to think of a color I don't see on the painted paper. I'm going to take some red. So I'm going to load up some water in the red, and I'm going to paint the edge of my eraser. Yes, I'm painting the edge of my eraser because I'm going to use it as a stamp. So I'm going to stamp. Makes an interesting shape, but the problem is with the stamping in watercolor, you'll need to keep reloading it. And whatever you do, thinking artistically, should be repeated throughout the paper. When I decorate paper, I like to say, think of it like a piece of wrapping paper where the whatever pattern you're working on continues through the whole paper and sometimes even off the edge. So I'm going to keep stamping in interesting patterns and ways, directions with the eraser. Sometimes, like I said, even going off the edge a little bit. So that one's halfway off the edge. Okay, so almost done with this supply. And when you're satisfied that you think you've balanced your paper with whatever you're decorating, you're going to want to make sure that you clean off that supply with my paper towel that I should have mentioned you should have. Make sure it's cleaned, and then I could set that to the side. Now I'm going to take another supply I have, my pen. So I thought that was an interesting tool because you could actually take another color. I'm going to try some black. So I'm going to load up the black, and I'm going to paint this area with my pen. And that one is a little wet, but if you see this one, you see it actually makes the impression of what the pen creates for a stamp. So I'm going to repeat that several times, loading up my brush with paint going all over the paper. Okay, so then when I'm done with that, I'm going to clean off that edge of the pen, dry it on my paper towel, set it to the side. You could also do the same with like a pencil. You could put some paint here. You see I put some blue paint, stamp it several times. You could even try another type of marker if you look at this, the Sharpie. That would make an interesting circle stamp as well. Another thing you may try, which I typically don't like to allow in the classroom, but since you're in an individual enclosed space, I think it's okay, as long as you clean up after yourself. Now watercolors, I don't want to get it on my clothes, so I have to be careful how I use it. If you're going to try what I am showing you, I don't want you hitting your brush very hard. I want you to try tapping. So here, I'm going to explain. So what I do is I'm going to pick purple now. I'm going to load the brush up with a lot of water. You need it wet. I'm going to hold it over my paper and just start tapping. Okay? Makes a nice little splattery effect. But again, it wouldn't be appropriate to start hitting my brush because that would make a huge mess, and we don't want that. That's not the correct way to use the materials. So we want to make sure we're using the materials appropriately and correctly. So again, I just take my finger and I just tap it. Okay, and another thing, if you enjoy this technique, I would not just focus on the middle because then you're just going to have a puddle. You want to try this technique over the entire surface. So maybe I'll try another color now. Let's try some orange. Load up my brush. I cleaned it. Make sure it's watery. Okay. And you might try some other techniques, stamping some other tools that I'm not mentioning. I'm looking for your creative ideas in decorating this paper. Okay, so I showed you some techniques to decorate your paper. I'll hold this up a little closer so you can see the effects. You want to let this dry. Now, what you're going to want to really do also is make sure you have a clean workspace. So as you set this off to dry, you're going to want to take your paper towel. I'm just going to dip it in a little bit of the water. Wipe and dry my area so I have a clean work surface when I am ready to paper weave. Okay, so that's the end of this part of today's lesson.